Hi, I'm Arjun. I'm a rising sophomore at Saratoga High School, and this is my third milestone. For this milestone, what I'm doing is I'm using 4 flex sensors on one Arduino to control 2 servos and 2 DC motors on another Arduino. And to demonstrate, as you can see, when I bend each flex sensor, the servos will turn, and for the last 2, let me plug it in. The DC motors will turn. And to explain how this works, I need to split it into one hardware and 2 software. So let's start with hardware. For my second milestone, actually everything was the same. Flex sensors, motors, except they were all on one Arduino. So the first step was actually just splitting up the circuitry. I had to move the flex sensors and the motors onto separate Arduinos so that I could control them using the NRFs. And that was just a time-consuming step, but it was fairly simple. And after that, I had to move on to the complicated step, actually figuring out how to use an NRF module. So I had to search up on the internet like several tutorials, but none of them worked for me until I found this one Hello World program that actually was just simple enough to explain it to me and get all the connections. And so I did that, and it worked. And after that, I had to actually implement that into my main project that I have here. And so what I did is I used my second milestone code, the one that I had to the flex sensors control the servos on the same Arduino, and I used my Hello World code that taught me how to have 2 Arduinos talk to each other, and I combined them into my transmitter and my receiver code, and that's what I have here. Once I ran that code, I ran into a couple problems. The first being that my servos were running really slow and they were twitching, and I had to solve each issue separately. So the first issue I fixed was actually the one where it was running really slow, and I checked all my circuitry and I checked all my code, and I found no reason why they should be running slower inconsistently. Until I looked at another student who was doing the same project as mine, and I looked at his circuitry, and he actually had a battery pack attached to the servos. I had only had a battery pack attached to the motors, because I knew that the motors wouldn't run with the computer power. But what I didn't realize is that actually the servos wouldn't run with the computer power either, because the computer simply wasn't powerful enough to power 2 Arduinos and 2 servos. So that I gave the servos their own power source, and then they started working fast like you saw in my demonstration. But the second issue is that they were still twitching. And I searched up on the internet, what do I do if my servos are twitching? And I got a couple responses, all in the same type of field, and what they told me to do is actually just put a delay in between both servos, because if I told both servos to move at the same time, they would get confused and start glitching, and that's why they started twitching. I didn't know what to do. Just so I had to add a delay so it can make clear which servo I was telling to do what. And after that, the servos were fine. But then I moved on to my major struggle, the 2 motors. For the longest time, the motors wouldn't turn. Like, I checked my circuitry, that was all fine. I checked my code, it all seemed fine to me, but the motors simply weren't turning. I had everything working, but it just wouldn't turn. All the data was transmitting from the transmitter to receiver, until I found out actually it was a pretty funny error. There are two functions that you use to get a DC motor to turn. One is digital write and one is analog write. Digital write you use if you're going to turn a motor on or off and you don't care how far it's turning, and that's what I was using. But I was putting a degree in, which would never have worked because digital write only turns the motor on or off, not to a specific degree. The function that I actually had to use was analog write, which turns it to a specific degree, which is what I wanted, the degree based on how far I was bending the flex sensors. And after that, the motors and the servos started working again, and that's how I got to where I am now. For my final milestone, what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to put all the flex sensors onto a glove and all the 4 motors onto the RC car. And I'm going to get all the wiring fixed, and I'm going to make it look a lot better than it does now. Finish the RC car, and then finish my code and hopefully get the entire project working. Thanks for listening.
Awesome.